Nearly 5 years after an FBI raid at City Hall sent shockwaves through Chicago's political scene, the corruption trial of former Alderman Ed Burke is set to begin on Monday.
In tonight's cover story, WGN political reporter Tamon Bradley goes inside the once powerful public servant's rise and fall that spanned 5 decades.
Last April at City Council, the end of an era. One of the last of the old-school Chicago machine politicians, Alderman Ed Burke, bid farewell.
Many of you have, over the years, heard me quote the great Anglo-Irish statesman Edmund Burke, who wrote, "In politics, there are no permanent enemies, no permanent friends, only permanent interests."
The fedora, pinstripe suits, driver, and bodyguards, Ed Burke looked the part, power personified. He may be retired, but the story of Ed Burke's extraordinary 54-year reign is still unfolding. The final chapter of his legacy will be written by the results of his federal corruption case.
One of the problems as people gain power is they tend to misuse it. And usually the longer they stay in office, the more they abuse it.
He was one of a kind in terms of the way this city operates. And sadly, he was also not that unusual in terms of his willingness to be corrupted by the system that he helped create.
Burke's rise began in the 1960s. After a stint as a Chicago police officer, Burke followed in his father's footsteps, taking over his 14th Ward aldermanic seat. In the 80s, Burke captured control of the powerful Finance Committee.
At that point, he had already been a long-serving member of council, and he had formed an alliance with Eddie Verdoliak, who was the most powerful person in council. And Verdoliak was not the sort of person who's going to dig into the nitty-gritty, whereas Ed Burke was.
Well, he's a lawyer, so he understands the law. He understands history. He understands the rules of order. But the most important is there are less than 10 members of the city council at any given time who understand the finances, the city budget, and how the city works.
Well, here's Harold!
Following the election of Harold Washington as Chicago's first black mayor, Alderman Ed Verdoliak and Burke banded together to challenge Washington at every turn. The men led a group of 29 aldermen in the years-long battle known as the Council Wars.
Harold would introduce something. Burke and his allies would oppose it.
All of a sudden, out of nowhere, declaring that the City Council of Chicago is a legislative body and playing to the racial divisions that had been part of that mayoral race. They were wearing white buttons on their lapels, the Verdoliak 29. It was very crude symbolism and very directly appealing to racial bias. And it's a blot on his career that he never has been able to completely erase.
At Finance, Burke controlled the city's $100 million workers' comp program, where he and political allies made decisions about disability checks for injured workers. Critics say there was no meaningful oversight or transparency.
Instead of using the executive branch or just an insurance company to handle that question, they had it handled by the Finance Committee.
For decades, Burke dodged federal investigations that threatened to weaken him, including a ghost payrolling scheme. Dozens were charged, but not Burke. Council colleagues marveled at Burke's encyclopedic knowledge of Chicago history, constituent services, and legislative insight. His immense skills and willingness to evolve allowed him to keep his job, despite a demographic shift in his ward to majority Hispanic. It's a story reminiscent of embattled former Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan.
As with Mike Madigan, where there was, in the back of people's minds, a concern that there might be something illegal happening behind the curtain, he also had such capability in terms of the actual job performance that in some instances I think people were willing to suspend suspicion in order to say, well, Ed Burke can get it done.
November 2018, the beginning of the end. Federal agents raided Burke's City Hall office. Months later, Burke is indicted on 14 counts. Among the allegations, demanding a Burger King franchise owner use his law firm for tax work in exchange for help with city permits. offering to grease the wheels for the redevelopment of the old post office if the developer retained his firm, and threatening to derail a proposed museum admission fee hike because the museum wouldn't give a friend's child an internship. Burke denies the allegations.
I'm not guilty of anything. I haven't done anything wrong, and I'm sure that once it gets to court, it'll be clear.
Prosecutors say the criminal activity was caught on tape. For 2 years, former Alderman Danny Solis wore a wire secretly recording conversations with Burke. The court is expected to hear the tapes.
There's a difference between reading the transcript and hearing the tapes. And I know from covering other trials that when you hear the audio, you really hear how real it is. And there are inflections of voice that really bring to the surface the greed, the transactional nature of these relationships, the leverage that is being applied.
The charges didn't stop 14th Ward voters from giving Burke a 13th term in 2019. His council exit came on his own terms 4 years later when he decided not to run again. No permanent enemies, no permanent friends, only permanent interests.
If I have failed during these past 54 years in achieving that goal, please permit me to apologize.
Now a new goal for the former Dean of City Council: avoid prison time. Tamon Bradley, WGN News.